A strange ship appeared in the sky one cold evening. It wasn't like any ship the people of Earth had ever seen before. It didn't have the sleek, shining design of their own spaceships, nor did it have the colors or shapes that people expected from the many science fiction stories they had read. This ship was different. Its dark, smooth surface reflected the clouds around it, making it almost impossible to see at first. It was silent, and it was enormous. The people below could only stare in awe, unsure of what to think. The world was in chaos. News stations across the globe broadcasted the image of the ship, but no one knew where it had come from. It wasn't from any country on Earth. It didn't belong to any space agency. It was a mystery. Fear spread quickly. People wondered if this was the beginning of an invasion. Governments scrambled to find answers. Military forces were put on alert. And yet, no one could explain why the ship had appeared, nor did anyone know what the beings inside it wanted. At first, there was nothing. The ship hovered silently above Earth, as if it were waiting for something. No one knew what it wanted. Was it a warning? A sign of something bigger coming? The world held its breath, waiting for any kind of message. But none came. The ship just floated, its presence alone enough to cause fear in every corner of the planet. And then something strange happened. The ship began to descend slowly, its movements smooth and almost graceful. It wasn't like any kind of craft Earth had ever designed. It didn't land in the way humans expected. It didn't make a loud crash or a rumble. Instead, it gently touched down in a remote, forgotten area, a small field, far from any major city. It landed without a sound, its large form casting a shadow over the landscape. People on the news could only watch in silence, unable to move, unable to speak. This moment felt like the calm before a storm. As the ship settled on the ground, strange figures began to emerge. Tall and imposing, they stepped out one by one. Their shapes were unlike any human being, and their movements were smooth and coordinated. The world could see them on TV, but no one knew what to make of them. They had large, piercing eyes, and their faces were hard to read. They wore armor that gleamed under the dull light of the setting sun. The aliens, if that's what they were, seemed to regard the area around them with a calm, almost disinterested air. They didn't speak. They didn't make a single sound. They only moved slowly, looking around as if studying the world around them. And then there was the man. He was the last one to step out of the ship. At first, no one even noticed him. The aliens were far more attention-grabbing with their strange, tall forms. But as the man stepped down from the ship, the air around him seemed to change. He didn't look like the others. He wasn't tall or imposing. He wasn't armored like the aliens. In fact, he didn't look like much at all. He was just an ordinary man. His clothes were plain, and he didn't carry any weapon. He was almost forgettable, except for one thing. He didn't speak. While the aliens continued to survey the world around them, the man remained silent. The air felt heavy around him. There was something about his presence that made the aliens pause. Their movements slowed, and their eyes, which had been cold and calculating moments earlier, now seemed hesitant. It was almost as if they were afraid. They didn't show it openly, but their actions betrayed them. The aliens, powerful and feared across many worlds, were always in control. They had conquered planets, they had defeated armies, and they had made even the bravest warriors bow in submission. But now, in the presence of this silent man, they hesitated. No one understood why. They were silent as well. It was as if they had never encountered a being like him before. The man stood there, unmoving, watching them with a calm that sent a chill down the spine of anyone who saw him. His face showed no emotion. He didn't speak a word. He simply stared at them. The aliens, one by one, began to lower their heads, not in greeting, but in what seemed like respect. A strange tension filled the air. It wasn't fear. At least not the kind of fear the people of Earth would understand. It was a deeper, more ancient kind of fear the kind that came from a knowledge so old that it was almost forgotten. The people of Earth could see the aliens bowing slightly, their bodies bending in a way that no one had expected. They were bowing to the man, not to the ship or the alien's leader, but to him. Why? What was so special about this human who had appeared from nowhere? As the man remained silent, the aliens began to step back, their movements more cautious now. They were no longer the powerful, intimidating figures they had seemed when they first arrived. Now, they looked almost afraid. Their eyes flicked to the man and then quickly away, as if they were trying to avoid meeting his gaze. The humans watching from Earth could only wonder what was happening. They had never seen anything like it before. This was no ordinary human. There was something about him that made even the most fearsome aliens pause in their tracks. The man didn't speak, not even once. He didn't need to. His presence was enough to make the aliens tremble. It was as if the very air around him was charged with an unseen power. The world could only watch, waiting for something to happen, but not knowing what that something would be. As the sun began to set, the ship's engines hummed softly, and the aliens retreated back into the craft. They moved quickly, without a word, but the man stayed where he was. He didn't go with them. He simply stood there, watching the sky, as the last of the daylight faded. For the next few hours, the world waited. The aliens remained in their ship, hidden from sight. The man, however, remained outside, standing alone in the field. His silence was louder than any sound, and the tension in the air was thick. The humans watching couldn't understand what had just happened, and the aliens, it seemed, weren't willing to explain. No one knew who this man was or why the aliens feared him. All they knew was that he had arrived, and his silence spoke louder than any words could. The world was still in shock after the strange event. News outlets across the globe were full of images and videos of the silent man standing alone in the field. People were talking, asking questions, but no one had any answers. Who was he? Why didn't he speak? Why did the aliens bow to him? The whole world was waiting, hanging on every word, but there were no answers, only silence. The man didn't leave the field where he had landed. He didn't go back into the ship, nor did he speak to anyone. He just stood there, watching the sky. People from all over the world tried to make sense of what they had seen. The scientists, the leaders, and even the military forces had no idea what to do. They had never faced anything like this before. Meanwhile, the aliens aboard the ship were acting strangely. They didn't make any move to attack Earth. They didn't make any attempt to communicate either. They remained hidden in their ship, watching from the shadows, but they never came out. They never spoke, and they certainly didn't try to invade. They only watched the silent man, and their eyes held fear. It wasn't long before Earth's governments realized that the man wasn't alone in this strange situation. There were whispers of him appearing in different parts of the world. He seemed to move without anyone seeing him. He didn't need to travel like ordinary people. One moment, he was in one city, and the next, he was in another, always silent, always watching. It was as though the world itself couldn't contain him. No one knew where he went, and when they looked for him, he was always just out of reach. Then, a strange thing happened. In one of the larger cities, an alien leader came down from the ship. His face was hard, cold, and filled with the kind of arrogance that came from having conquered so many worlds. This alien was different from the others. He wasn't afraid like the others. He wasn't trembling like they had been when they saw the man. This alien was ready to speak, to confront him. He walked toward the silent man, his steps echoing in the empty air. The world held its breath. The camera crews were filming, and millions of people were watching from their homes. The alien stopped a few feet away from the man and looked him up and down. His eyes were full of confidence. "You, human, are nothing," the alien said, his voice loud and commanding. He expected the man to respond. He wanted the human to beg for mercy, to fall at his feet, or at least show some fear. But the man didn't say a word. He didn't even look at the alien. He just stood there, his hands at his sides, his face unreadable. The alien raised his voice again, but this time with anger. "You think you can stand before me and say nothing? Do you know who I am?" he shouted. But still, the man didn't respond. He just kept staring ahead, as if he didn't care. For a moment, the alien stood there, unsure of what to do. No one had ever ignored him like this. No one had ever been so calm in his presence. He was the leader of a vast empire. He had seen entire civilizations fall. But this human, this silent man, seemed completely unfazed by him. With a growl of frustration, the alien tried something else. He raised his hand, and a weapon appeared, glowing with dangerous energy. He pointed it at the man, ready to strike. But still, the man did nothing. He didn't move. He didn't flinch. The alien hesitated. For the first time, the alien felt fear. He lowered his weapon, his hand shaking. There was something in the air, something about the man's presence that made him hesitate. The alien knew he could destroy anyone with a simple command, but in front of this silent human, he felt powerless. He couldn't explain it. It wasn't just the man's silence. It was the power that seemed to radiate from him, even though he did nothing. The alien took a step back, unsure of himself. What kind of power was this? Why did he feel so small standing in front of this human? The man still didn't speak, and the alien leader could only watch as he slowly turned and walked away, leaving the human standing there, unmoved. Back in the ship, the aliens were whispering to one another. They were nervous now. The leader's failure to confront the silent man made them all uneasy. The silence that the man carried with him wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a weight. It was heavy. And it made the aliens feel as if they were being watched by something much more powerful than they were willing to admit. Over the next few days, more aliens tried to approach the man. But every time they did, they were met with the same result. The man said nothing. He didn't fight them. He didn't try to escape. He simply stood still, watching them with his cold, empty eyes. Some of the aliens even tried to speak to him, asking questions, pleading with him, but there was never an answer. The silence only grew more intense with every failed attempt. The strange thing was, it wasn't just the aliens who were affected by his silence. Humans were too. As they watched the scenes unfold on their screens, they began to wonder if there was something more to this man. He didn't speak, but he didn't need to. There was something about him that made the entire world hold its breath when he appeared. No one could explain why they felt this way, but it was undeniable. And still, the man remained silent. He didn't speak. He didn't show fear. He didn't show anything. He simply waited. The world watched, and the aliens trembled. The days passed, but the world was still in shock. No one could stop talking about the silent man. He was everywhere on TV, in newspapers, on the internet. His face was known all over the world, but no one could explain why he never spoke. People watched him with a mix of fear and curiosity, wondering what he would do next. The aliens, too, were watching him. They were growing desperate. It had been days since the man's arrival, and still, no one knew who he was or what he wanted. The alien leaders gathered in secret meetings, discussing how to deal with him. They couldn't understand him. They couldn't control him. And worst of all, they feared him. One by one, the most powerful aliens tried to confront him, but none of them succeeded. Every time they came close, they felt an unease they couldn't explain. The man didn't fight back. He didn't move a muscle, but there was something about him, something in the way he stood, that made even the strongest of them hesitate. No alien had ever experienced this kind of fear before, and it wasn't fear of pain or death. It was something deeper, something ancient. The aliens tried everything they could think of. They sent their best soldiers, armed with advanced weapons, to capture him. They tried to force him to speak, to make him show weakness. But the man didn't flinch. He didn't even look at them. He just stood there, silent and still. One of the alien leaders, a tall figure known as Jorek, decided to take matters into his own hands. Jorek was one of the most feared beings in the galaxy. He had destroyed entire worlds with a single order. He had crushed armies of thousands without breaking a sweat. He was powerful, and he knew it. No one had ever dared to challenge him. But the silent man was different. Jorek stood in front of him, glaring down, expecting the man to bow to him, to cower, to show fear. But the man didn't move. He didn't even blink. Jorek raised his voice, his tone harsh and filled with anger. "Why do you stand here, human?" he demanded. "What do you want from us? You will bow to me, or you will regret it." But still, the man didn't answer. He just stared at Jorek, his eyes cold and empty. For a long moment, Jorek stood there, waiting for the man to speak. But nothing happened. The silence was deafening. Jorek's confidence began to waver. He stepped closer, his hands trembling slightly, but the man didn't move. He was like a statue, immovable, unfeeling. Finally, Jorek did the only thing he could think of. He attacked. With a quick motion, he raised his hand, and a burst of energy shot out toward the man. The blast was powerful, enough to destroy an entire city, but the man didn't even flinch. He didn't try to dodge it. The energy hit him, but it didn't seem to harm him. It was as if the energy had no effect. Jorek's eyes widened in disbelief. How was this possible? No being had ever withstood his power. The silence grew heavier, pressing down on him. His heart began to race. For the first time in his life, he was scared. He had never felt fear like this before. The man still didn't speak. But then, something strange happened. Jorek felt a chill run through his body, as though something ancient and powerful was watching him. It was as if the very air around the man was filled with an energy he couldn't understand. Jorek stepped back, his legs shaking. There was no way to explain what was happening. It wasn't just the man's silence that was terrifying. It was the power he radiated. Jorek had faced enemies stronger than him before, but they had always fought back. They had always shown their power. This man, however, didn't need to fight. He didn't need to do anything. His silence alone was enough to make Jorek feel small, weak, and helpless. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, Jorek turned and walked away. The silence hung in the air like a heavy cloud, but the man did not follow. He simply remained where he was, as if he had never been bothered by the attack at all. The alien leader returned to his ship, shaken to his core. He had never experienced anything like this before. His soldiers were waiting for him, eager to hear about his victory. But Jorek didn't speak. He couldn't speak. He had no words for what had just happened. He had been defeated, not by force, but by silence. Back on Earth, people continued to watch the events unfold on their screens. They had seen the blast, heard the alien leader's threats, but they didn't know what had really happened. All they knew was that the man had stood there, silent and unshaken, while the most powerful alien in the galaxy had failed to harm him. As the days went by, the world began to wonder if there was something more to this man than anyone had realized. He wasn't just some ordinary human. He was something else, something powerful, something ancient. No one knew who he was or where he came from, but everyone could feel the weight of his presence. The man's silence was no longer just a strange quirk. It was a warning. And the aliens, for the first time in their lives, were listening. But still, the man didn't speak. He remained silent, his face unreadable, his power undeniable. And with each passing day, the mystery of who he was only deepened. The world was changing, and no one knew how to stop it. Every day, more strange things were happening. More alien leaders came down from their ships, but none of them could do anything. The silent man was still there, standing, watching, waiting. His presence was like a heavy cloud over the earth and the aliens who had come to conquer it. The silence around him was no longer just strange. It was terrifying. The aliens, powerful and feared in their own right, now found themselves afraid. They had never been afraid of anything until the man came. Each time one of them tried to approach him, each time they tried to use their weapons or force him to speak, they were met with the same result: silence. The man never moved. He didn't speak. He didn't fight back. But still, the fear he caused was growing, and no one understood why. The alien commanders, the soldiers, and even the mighty leaders who had crushed entire worlds, all of them now feared this one human who said nothing. Back on Earth, people began to talk about the man in whispers. No one knew where he came from. No one knew what he wanted, but everyone could feel the power that surrounded him. They could feel it even from miles away. It was as if the Earth itself was holding its breath when he was near. The people who had once feared the aliens now feared the silent man too. There were rumors. There were stories. Some said he was a god. Others believed he was something much older, something that had been waiting for the right moment to return. No one knew the truth, but everyone knew one thing for sure: the silent man was different, and he was dangerous. The aliens were growing desperate. They had never faced an enemy like this before. They had tried everything they could think of, but nothing worked. Their weapons, their threats, their most powerful leaders, all of them failed in front of this man. And every time they tried to force him to act, to show some weakness, the man remained calm. He stood there, unshaken, unaffected by their power. But the aliens weren't the only ones who felt the pressure building. As the days passed, the tension on Earth grew stronger. People started to notice the changes. The atmosphere felt heavier. The world seemed to be waiting for something. What would happen next? Would the aliens attack? Would they try to destroy the Earth? Or would the man do something no one expected? One night, something unexpected happened. The man, who had always been silent, moved. For the first time since his arrival, he took a step forward. The world held its breath as they watched him on their screens. He didn't look at the aliens. He didn't look at the people. He just kept walking. His footsteps soft but steady. He walked through the streets, past the soldiers who tried to stop him, past the cameras that captured every moment. He didn't care about the soldiers. He didn't care about the cameras. He just walked, his face still blank, his eyes unblinking. The world watched in silence. What would he do? Where was he going? The people of Earth had never seen anything like this before. And the aliens were no better off. They watched from their ships, their eyes full of confusion and fear. They had never seen anything like this man. As the silent man walked through the streets, a strange thing happened. The people who saw him didn't run. They didn't scream. They didn't fight back. They just watched. It was as if they were frozen in place, unable to look away. They felt something deep inside them, something they couldn't explain. Fear, yes, but also something else. A kind of awe. The man continued walking, moving toward the heart of the city. He didn't speak to anyone. He didn't stop to answer questions or give explanations. He just walked, his every step steady and strong. His silence was deafening, and yet it was the most powerful sound anyone had ever heard. The aliens, watching from above, began to realize that this wasn't just a battle of strength. It wasn't a battle of weapons or armies. This was something deeper, something that went beyond physical power. The aliens, with all their technology, all their strength, were beginning to understand something they hadn't before. They weren't just afraid of the man because he was silent. They were afraid because his silence meant something. It was a sign, a warning. As the silent man reached the center of the city, he stopped. For the first time, he turned to face the camera that was recording him. His eyes were cold, and the world seemed to stop as he looked into the lens. He didn't speak, but his gaze was heavy. It was as if he was looking straight through the camera, straight through the screen, into the hearts of everyone watching. And then, in that moment, something happened that no one could explain. A wave of energy, invisible yet powerful, radiated out from him. It wasn't like a blast. It wasn't something anyone could see. But they felt it. The people watching from their homes felt it, and the aliens in their ships felt it, too. The aliens, who had been so confident in their power, felt the full weight of the man's gaze, and they felt it in a way they couldn't understand. It wasn't just fear. It was something ancient, something older than time itself. The aliens had never experienced anything like it. It was a force beyond their comprehension, a force that made them question everything they had ever known. The silent man didn't say a word, but the world had changed, and the aliens knew, deep down, that they had underestimated him. This wasn't just a human. This wasn't just a warrior. This was something far more dangerous. And the fear continued to rise. The day had come. The entire world was holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. The silent man stood at the center of the city, his face still unreadable, his eyes cold and calm. He had not spoken a single word since his arrival. Yet, in the silence, something powerful had been growing. The people of Earth, the aliens watching from their ships, and even the planet itself could feel it. Above them, the alien ships hovered, their shadows stretching across the city. The aliens had gathered their forces. They had prepared everything for this moment. They believed they had no choice but to stop the silent man. They had tried everything else, every weapon, every leader, every soldier. And yet, nothing had worked. Now, they were ready to face him directly. At the heart of the alien fleet, the largest ship, the flagship, sent out its most powerful commander. His name was Chloreth. Chloreth was known across the galaxy for his ruthlessness. He had led countless invasions and destroyed countless civilizations. No one had ever stood against him and won. But this time, things were different. This time, he was up against the silent man. Chloreth's ship landed near the city, and the world watched. The people feared the aliens. They feared what would happen next. The alien forces poured out, hundreds of soldiers marching toward the center where the silent man stood. But the man didn't move. He didn't acknowledge their presence. He didn't even blink. He simply stood there, waiting. Chloreth stepped forward, his armor glinting in the sunlight. His face was hard, his expression grim. He had seen everything that had happened up to this point, and he knew that the silent man was no ordinary human. But Chloreth was determined. He had come here to end this, to show the world that the aliens would not be defeated by some silent figure. He raised his voice, his tone filled with authority. "Human, you cannot stop us. We are the rulers of the galaxy. You cannot stand against us forever. We will take this planet, and you will bow to us." Still, the man said nothing. He didn't even look at Chloreth. The silence between them was deafening. The air felt heavy, like the entire world was holding its breath. Chloreth's patience began to wear thin. He was used to control, used to having others fear him. But the silent man, he was different. "You think your silence makes you strong." Chloreth spat. "You think you can stop me? You are nothing." With a quick motion, Chloreth raised his weapon, a sword forged from the strongest materials in the universe. The blade glowed with deadly energy. He swung it at the silent man, expecting to see him flinch, expecting to see him fall to the ground. But once again, the man did nothing. He didn't move, didn't react. The sword struck the man's chest, and for a moment, there was a sound like cracking metal. But then, something strange happened. The blade bent. It didn't cut the man. It didn't even leave a mark. Chloreth's eyes widened in shock. This wasn't possible. No weapon, no material, could resist his sword. He swung again, harder this time, with all his strength. But once again, the sword bent. The man didn't even flinch. It was as if the very air around him was stopping the weapon from reaching him. Chloreth stepped back, his heart racing. This was unlike anything he had ever faced. He couldn't defeat the man. He couldn't even touch him. The silence that surrounded the man felt like a wall, an impenetrable force that pushed everything away. And Chlorith could feel it pressing in on him, suffocating him, making him feel smaller than he had ever felt before. Then, without warning, the man moved. It wasn't a fast movement. It wasn't a fight. He simply raised his hand, slowly and deliberately, and pointed a finger toward Chlorith. The air around the alien commander began to shift. It was subtle at first, like a strange hum vibrating through the air. But then it grew stronger, like a wave of energy building up from the ground. Chlorith tried to move, to raise his weapon, but it was too late. The energy from the silent man reached him, and with it came a force stronger than anything he had ever known. The pressure around Chlorith's chest felt like it was crushing him. He gasped for breath, but it felt as if the air itself had become thick and heavy. For the first time in his life, Chlorith felt truly afraid. His hands trembled, and the weapon he held fell to the ground. He had no control. He had no power. The man's silence was like an unspoken command, a force that stripped him of everything he had ever known. His knees buckled, and he fell to the ground, unable to stand. The alien soldiers watched in horror. They had never seen their commander like this. They had never seen anyone so powerful, so unmoved by their threats, so unafraid. And now, they were starting to understand that this man was not just a human. He was something far beyond them. The silent man didn't speak. He didn't need to. He turned away from Chlorith and began walking again, his steps slow and steady. The alien soldiers, one by one, dropped their weapons and stepped back. They couldn't fight him. They couldn't even stand near him. The world watched as the silent man walked through the alien forces, and for the first time, the aliens realized that they had lost. They had underestimated him. They had thought they could control Earth, but the silent man had shown them that they were not in charge. He didn't need to speak, to fight, or to command. His very presence was enough to break them. As the man walked away, the aliens retreated. They didn't fight. They didn't resist. They left Earth, their ships flying away into the sky. And the world, stunned and silent, watched as they disappeared into the distance. The silent man had won. And in that silence, there was no need for words. The Earth was safe.